Comrades and friends, I'd like to welcome you all to the Communist Party of Ireland's annual Connolly commemoration here in Arbour Hill, the final resting place of James Connolly and other leaders of the 1916 Rising. I would like to thank you all for joining us today, especially those of you who've travelled from further afield. Each year we come here to pay tribute to Connolly and to rededicate ourselves to the political struggle begun by him for a workers' republic. This year is of particular significance as it marks both the 150th anniversary of Connolly's and the 200th anniversary of Karl Marx's birth. The ideas of Connolly, of sovereignty, socialism and anti-imperialism remain crucial to the issues impacting on the working class today. It remains essential that we continue to nurture and support the uptake and understanding of Connolly's values and principles amongst younger generations and the wider working class. The commemoration today will involve the laying of wreaths by representatives of the Communist Party of Ireland and Connolly Youth Movement. Following this, there will be an opportunity for any other persons wishing to lay flowers to do so. We will then have a minute's silence before moving on to today's speakers. There will be two speakers today. First, Alex Homage, General Secretary of the Connolly Youth Movement, and then the main oration will be given by Gearóid O'Mackall, a member of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, Irish language activist, and active member of the Friends of the International Brigades. Since we last stood here in 2017, the party has celebrated its 25th National Congress, which elected a new and reinvigorated National Executive Committee. We have committed ourselves to a transformative strategy that strengthens the political and economic position and interests of workers, while weakening the power of capital and its mechanisms of control. We have continued to promote the ideas of socialist republicanism, unity of our people, and equality. The party continues to strive to build unity among left and progressive forces, between socialists and republicans, through engagement with the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. Through the Campaign for Public Housing, we have demanded a new system of universally accessible public housing for all, and an end to insecurity, overcrowding, extortionate rents, and economic evictions. We recognise that the state has no interest in resolving the housing crisis and seek to expose its role in furthering the interests of capitalism while fighting for people's right to a secure home. We have and will continue to demonstrate our resistance to imperialist air shows that continue to fetishise war and its weaponry through the Bray War display campaign. We will continue to fight for Irish neutrality against state alignment of political and military strategy with the EU and NATO. We will continue to strive for unity of the working class on both sides of the imperialist-imposed border. We know that the interests of the working class, north and south, are of little interest to British and EU imperial powers, and it is the interests of big business that will be reflected in the outcome of Brexit negotiations. We will continue to fight for national sovereignty and working people's ability to pursue economic and social policies in their interests. We've also held a number of successful events to celebrate International Working Women's Day, to encourage discussion and debate around the struggles of working class women in Ireland. We recognise that there can be no freedom without full freedom for women to be able to make decisions regarding their own bodies and reproductive choices. As such, the repeal of the 8th Amendment represents an important potential step towards full and equal citizenship for women, and we argue that the same rights should be extended to women living in the 6 counties. The commemoration also marks the final day of the Connolly Festival, which aims to bring people together in a conversation through words, music and performance about where our society is and where it wants to go. This has been the 4th year of the Connolly Festival, and it has offered a diverse range of events, including exhibitions and political theatre on the subject of Connolly, LGBT performances, theatre and discussion on issues impacting women, and of course the annual James Connolly Memorial Lecture, during which the continued relevance of Marx has been explored. I would now call on Laura Duggan to lay flowers on behalf of the Communist Party of Ireland. I now call on Anya Lamb to lay flowers on behalf of the Connolly Youth Movement. I would now call on anyone else wishing to lay flowers to do so now. I now ask if we could observe a minute's silence in memory of all those who have given their lives in the fight for Irish freedom. Thank you. I now call on Alex Hommett to address this gathering on behalf of the Connolly Youth Movement.
Comrades, friends, today we stand under our banner and flag to commemorate the execution of an inspirational figure of our class. He who was executed for his role in the Easter Rising, and he who brought forward the understanding of republicanism among the myriad of contradictions it faced. His name was Connolly. Connolly, who eviscerated the reformists, the nationalists, and those looking for compromise with capital. He, like Wolfe Tone, laid down to the movement of the time that the vanguard of the revolution in Ireland would be the dispossessed, the men of no property, and those divorced from the wealth that they create. My name is Alex. I have been a member of the Communist Party of Ireland and Connolly Youth Movement since August 2014, and I'm honoured to be able to speak this year. It is a curious thing to commemorate a man whose ideas are so written out of the Irish history curriculum that growing up here, you would think that he did not exist. Yet he did exist, and the impact on Irish history and the struggle for liberation is something we continue to evaluate and to feel today. Connolly redirected the historical undercurrents of Irish republicanism towards a direction that united with the social and national question. Connolly cut through the abstract notions of freedom. He determined sovereignty in the most concrete and immediate terms and articulated this in an earlier programme for the Irish Socialist Republican Party, a document many of you are familiar with. What underpinned this document and what Connolly understood? For us, the people of Ireland, to truly feel, express, and guarantee our liberation, we must also own the mechanisms that organise the functions of our society. To Connolly and to us, this means that the banks, the ports, the canals, the factories, and the overall control, production of all commodities that we use and require on a day-to-day basis. Connolly argued that for Ireland to be free from the exploitation that it suffered under the occupation and colonisation of the British Empire, the landlord-employer caste in Ireland would also have to be dealt with. A changing of the flag over Dublin Castle or a change of the accent of your landlord was neither an acceptable nor a sufficient solution to the question of freedom. Freedom in capitalist society always remains the same as it was in ancient Greece. Freedom for the slave owner. The words of Lenin, which resonate with the analysis Connolly developed on the question of national liberation of Ireland. Where does that bring us today? And why is the analysis Connolly provided before relevant? Opponents and critics of Connolly will tell us that times have changed, and we must accustom ourselves to that. North and south of the border, the workers of Ireland are being hammered by the exploiter classes. We're called Generation Rent, unable to afford to live or work towards secure housing. Hundreds of thousands of people simply pack their bags and leave, motivated not by some sort of innate desire to find adventure abroad, but because the state and its parliamentary social democratic lackeys have robbed young people of all opportunities. Emigration becomes the only available option to find life elsewhere. Emigration becomes the only chance at a rich life of opportunities. And we must remember too the historic role of emigration, and the mass displacement of the Irish people has always been used as a weapon to confiscate land or to alleviate the austerity policies that destroy rural and urban communities. Austerity, a mechanism that transfers wealth from the workers to the ruling class, has also implicitly thrown young people into an almost inescapable abyss. No decently paid work, no housing, no access to proper health services, and no value for the education that we're rigorously asked to pursue after school. Why are we working? Why are we paying rent? Is it in our own interest that we wake up every morning, or is it in the interest of a parasitical exploiter class? Just over a year ago, the European Broadcasting Union conducted research among 18 to 34-year-olds, and one of the questions they asked was very simple. Would you join an uprising against the government? 54% of these young people confirmed that they would. 45% of them said that they did not trust politicians, while 80% of men and 78% of women said that religious beliefs did not have an important role to play in their lives. What do any of these results mean, coupled with the increasing deprivation brought on young people by the ever-advancing forces of capital? What conclusions do young communists in the Connolly youth movement draw? The deprivation brought about to working people and young people is in a dialectical relationship to the politicisation and radicalisation of young people. The more opportunities we are stripped of, the more difficult our conditions become, the less we are paid, and the more we become angry. The task of the Connolly youth movement as a class-conscious and communist youth organisation is to provide an understanding of the anger that young people are facing and hone it. Our task is to give clarity to what is unclear today, and we are making slow but steady gains. For a quarter of a century, the Connolly youth movement has not seen the growth we are now experiencing. Previous general secretaries have done stellar work, and they must be commended. Work that we are now consolidating on, advancing on, and building on. The Connolly youth movement is seeing a resurgence in dramatically different conditions to when it was founded before. And it makes me very excited to be a member and be a witness to this. When the Connolly youth movement was founded, Ireland was in political and military turmoil, as was the world. The Soviet Union offered a place where international communists could find refuge, training, and help, something that both the CYM and the Communist Party miss greatly. Yet we have other factors to rejoice over. The hegemony that the two main political parties of the ruling class represent has fallen. In 2011, for the first time in history, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael failed to secure over 50% of the vote. This isn't an accident, but a result of the long oppressed people of Ireland expressing themselves in the limited forms of a bourgeois republic, the ballot box. But there is more. For the collapse in hegemony is not simply reflected in the political parties, but also in the Catholic Church. The poll cited above demonstrates that organised religious institutions have been hit by a very powerful crisis, and they are failing to recover from it. The collapse of support for the traditional political parties, the loss of faith in organised religion, and the crisis of 2008 tell me and my comrades in the Connolly Youth Movement one thing. There is a great awakening on the horizon for my generation, and the Connolly Youth Movement will be firmly at the heart of every struggle that involves it. That is where the Connolly Youth Movement will experience growth, opportunity and development, where we will provide the clarity that I spoke of earlier. For a century, the ideas of Connolly have been carried on by the communist movement, and for a century, communists in Ireland and socialist republicans have been attacked, imprisoned, killed and persecuted for their desire, nay, want for a better and more egalitarian society, just like Connolly himself demanded. The obstacles they faced before have fallen away. And while we face new obstacles as young communists, I tell you now, we will fly the red flag. We will make no compromise. Thank you.
I'd now ask if Gerard O'Mackel could come forward to deliver today's main oration.
Gurmagad Janelle, agus Gurkid, my agav agan fartia as an Karua Lorch live fui molech, Seamus O'Connell, Sanach special the Shaw, in a Wilshan Ali Lesha Comradiha. At 07:15 hours on May the 12th, 1916, Marxist theorist, socialist author, industrial union organiser, citizen army founder, Commandant General of the Dublin Division of the Republican Army and Vice President of the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic, Comrade James Connolly, was summarily executed by a British firing squad just across the river in the yard of Kilmainham Jail. Born 150 years ago on the 5th of June 1868 in the crowded Irish immigrant slum of Cowgate to parents John Connolly and Mary McGinn from Ahanlore in the impoverished townland of Killycoonach, County Monaghan, James Connolly was unquestionably our greatest ever socialist theorist and practitioner. The Cowgate into which Connolly was born harboured thousands of Irish families living in single-room dwellings. Little Ireland's abysmal living conditions forced a 10-year-old Connolly into the adult world of factory work in order to support his family. Indeed, so precarious were the economic conditions faced by the Connollys that a 14-year-old James, like so many others of his class, was eventually forced to seek economic security in the ranks of the King's Liverpool Regiment. James Connolly's formative years, therefore, brought him face to face with the cruel realities of grinding poverty, labour exploitation and life in the Imperial British military. Ironically, it was in the British Army that Connolly most likely developed his early national and social consciousness, as his regiment was heavily infiltrated at that time by the Fenian movement. But it was in Scotland that Connolly began to develop his class consciousness under the tutelage of John Leslie and his older brother, also named John. Connolly's subsequent path to legendary international Marxist icon is both well documented and well known among all present here today. The Connolly exhibition, erected in the O'Riordan Redmond Room at Connolly Books, is a wonderful resource for those who don't have that information. And it was a delight yesterday to witness so many people come in off the street and access information on our foremost and most unapologetic ambassador for a 32-county socialist republic. Yes, we come to Arbour Hill to eulogise the father of Irish Marxism. Yes, we come here every year to extol his words and deeds. And yes, we proudly pay homage to his selfless sacrifice and martyrdom. But foremost in our motivation for being here today and for the organisation of an entire week of James Connolly Festival events is to give practical and contemporary expression to Comrade Connolly's teachings and to evaluate how his words and deeds might be adapted to the political and economic conditions of the 21st century. We have recently witnessed in the historic year of 2016 the way in which the 26-county state can accommodate the remembrance and commemoration of the Irish revolutionary martyrs of 1916. Not alone can the Irish bourgeoisie laud the historic contributions of our revolutionaries, they even feel safe and secure enough to patronise their memory with the nomenclature of state and public buildings. But what used to us is a Connolly station, a Connolly hospital, or even a Connolly house, when the great man's teachings are at best ignored and at worst defiled and debased in a state where the noble ideals of socialism, workers' democracy, economic planning, redistribution, and political and economic sovereignty are drowned out in a contemporary clamour of consumerism, individualism, identity politics, and deference to the neoliberal and imperialist ideology of the European Union and their US associates. While the first Dáil Éireann give democratic and tangible expression to the honourable ideals of James Connolly and his Republican allies, the counter-revolutionaries of the new Free State bourgeoisie recognised the threat posed by the democratic programme's egalitarian and socialist principles and moved quickly to first marginalise and then eradicate the more progressive economic and social ideologies stirred by the Irish Revolution. James Connolly's Marxism has always made him and continues to make him an uncomfortable figure among the leaders of the 1916 Rising, who are now deemed safe for beatification by the modern bourgeoisie. In 2018, Ireland is still partially occupied by the British imperial state, and we are struggling to free our legislature from the admittedly declining influence of the Roman Catholic Church. With our sovereignty and independence subjugated by the triple lock of EU, US and British imperialism, levels of economic inequality and income disparity in Ireland are now returning to Edwardian-era proportions. Buoyed by their temporary success in turning the last financial crisis and the weakness of organised labour's response into a golden opportunity to roll back the modest gains made by the working class in the last 60-odd years, the capitalist robber barons have now unleashed a full frontal assault through the adoption of neoliberal economic prescriptions. Profiteering landlordism, rack renting, evictions, epidemic homelessness, economic insecurity, food banks, child poverty and malnutrition have all returned to haunt modern urban and rural Ireland. Worse, these odious byproducts of capitalism have been greeted in many quarters with a blithe acceptance and the usual obfuscation from the mainstream media. In almost 100 years of existence, the Irish state has failed to provide a universal healthcare system or a comprehensive secular state education for our people, funded by general taxation and free at the point of delivery. Two cornerstones of basic provision in any republic worthy of the name. It's tempting to ask, what would Connolly have to say? Or what would Connolly do today? But these, comrades, are the wrong questions. James Connolly clearly understood the futility of attempting to duplicate historic blueprints for revolutionary action, or of replicating the political techniques of past eras, divorced as they are from their specific historical context. In the 102 years since Connolly's execution, Irish society, the global economy, technological progress, and the very structure of capitalist enterprise have all changed beyond recognition. The British Empire that executed Connolly has been superseded by a new imperium of globalised finance and unrestrained markets. Connolly, in a phrase that was equally applicable to himself, told us, "The greatness of Wolfe Tone lay in the fact that he imitated nobody." Connolly's task, like ours today, was to apply and test his Marxist theory against the material conditions faced by the working class in his own lifetime. Our task in 2018, comrades, is to set about the formidable task of the reconquest of 21st century Ireland. It's the same task faced by Connolly in a new set of historical conditions. The end goal is the same, however. We need to apply our Marxist analysis to achieve a programme and strategy for replacing capitalism. Not a programme for alleviating the worst aspects of capitalism and imperialism, but a programme that recognises that capitalism has unsolvable contradictions inbuilt in its DNA. Revolution, comrades, is a cultural, political and economic struggle for superior ideas. None of us are naive about the difficulties we face in reorienting the struggles of the working class into a cohesive and ideologically driven challenge to the capitalist state. Those struggles are happening every day, all around us, and we as communists must be to the fore in the people's struggles, both defensive and offensive. The role and contribution of the party in this period is vitally important, laying new groundwork for contact and communication with the working class and the popular masses. The strengthening of monopoly capital is bound to bring a further sharpening of the contradiction between capital and salaried labour, and thus a sharpening of all social contradictions. These are contradictions that arise from the built-in reproductive cycle of capitalism, coexisting extreme opulence and mass poverty, surplus and want, economic growth and wage restraint, full employment and in-work poverty. These are not blips or mistakes or the product of corruption or a bad policy. They're as much a byproduct of capitalism as the ecological destruction of our planet and the obliteration of our natural resources. Working people need to understand the interconnected relations between the state, establishment, political parties and the powerful economic forces that control their lives. Workers need to understand who really runs the government and whose interest it serves. That's why we need to reinvigorate our education programme to grow and develop our young political cadre, that they may be enabled and empowered to lead working people in their everyday struggles. We communists must educate and agitate within the trade unions, together with the workers, so that they become organisers of the class struggle in their workplace, particularly young people who work without any rights and with very low salaries. We must empower women, encourage them to join the party, and support their struggle for full emancipation, beginning with full bodily autonomy and the right to appropriate health care. The feminist James Connolly tells us, "None so fitted to break the chains as they who wear them, none so well equipped to decide what is a fetter." In its march towards freedom, the working class of Ireland must cheer on the efforts of those women who, feeling on their souls and bodies the fetters of the ages, have arisen to strike them off, and cheer all the louder if it's in hatred of thraldom and passion for freedom the women's army forges ahead of the militant army of labour. Historically, women have been subjected to discriminatory laws in relation to employment, wages, family planning and medical access to abortion. This is a legacy of the alliance of a reactionary state, a state created by the victory of counter-revolutionary forces with the moral authority of the Catholic Church. Women who played such an important role in the revolutionary decade from 1913 to 1922 had to be driven back, repressed and controlled, just as the state had to drive the working class and revolutionary forces back so as to cement its victory. On the 25th of May, we will have the opportunity to repeal one of the main pieces of discriminatory legislation within the legal and constitutional system of this state. Safe and legal access to abortion is an absolute necessity. While the right of access to safe and secure abortion is an issue for all women, it is also one that tells the story of a class-divided society. As women make up the majority of low-paid workers, it is working women who mainly experience precarious employment and zero-hour contracts. For them to gather the necessary funds both for travel and to have a termination in Britain, and also to secure the necessary time to do so, has an inordinately discriminatory effect on working class women. In the 6 counties, there's also a growing campaign for change in the law governing abortion. There's a spirit of cooperation between the campaigns in both parts of the country. Repealing the 8th Amendment is about democracy for women, for medical equality, for giving women a choice in what they need to do, what is in their best interests. Vodail tá an cúigúla is fihe, ní séise gan séise na man. Our transformative strategy has to be an evolving thought process and a way of looking at political crises and formulating demands and struggles. The transformative strategy has to be related to the specific and current nature of capitalism in our time. Fundamental to this strategy is identifying the weak points of capitalism here in Ireland and putting forward demands that bring about long-term change through the mobilising of working people, and in so doing, affecting the balance of power between labour and capital in a direction favourable to labour. We must harness the energy of resistance. We must combine, unite and give leadership to disparate and seemingly unrelated political, social, cultural and economic points of struggle. We are not reformers, we are revolutionaries who provide strategic leadership to nascent but instinctive urges among our people to resist the barbaric outworkings of capitalism. Examples of how our transformative strategy plays out in a crisis situation are the mobilisation of water charges, where we have argued for a constitutional referendum to secure the future of publicly financed, publicly owned and publicly provided water, and the housing emergency, where we are arguing for the state to build public housing universally available to all and related to the means to pay. Housing provision in Ireland must be transformed into a system where every citizen has a right to a decent, secure home, available for rent from the state as part of the social contract between citizen and state. These homes could be designed, built and fitted out by a state-owned building company and the local authorities, reducing costs by up to a half and ensuring that homes are built to a decent, safe standard. This would help bring an end to the precarious nature of employment in the building industry and the widespread use of bogus self-employment in that industry. State-led public house building would break the monopoly of the private sector on the building of houses and end the artificial shortages in available properties, as the private sector manipulates the supply of available properties in order for prices and rents to rise, and in turn, of course, their profits, which is their only reason for building homes. What's different about the campaign for public housing and previous public housing developments is that homes are to be made universally available to all who choose to avail of them, as a right, regardless of income. We need to transform housing policy from where a home is seen as a commodity on which to make a profit into a citizen's right to have a home supplied by the state. These examples of our transformative strategy may well bring the state into conflict with the European Union. The EU has built a neoliberal constitutional framework around the functioning of capitalism within its member states. Our strategy will bring the state and working people into conflict with that framework. But that's grand. Building socialism, by definition, will bring us into conflict with the EU. It's unavoidable. Let's expose the nature of the EU and allow working people to see it for what it really is. We will continue to work with left Republicans and trade unionists in the Pedro O'Donnell Forum to analyse and dissect the class nature of imperialism's grip on Ireland. James Connolly was all too keenly aware of the nature of imperialism and stressed the importance of broad working class unity in resisting its insidious threat to our democracy, independence and sovereignty. Connolly developed a number of innovative theoretical positions regarding the relationship between Marxism and anti-imperialism, positions heretical to both conventional forms of Irish nationalism and the form of socialism espoused by the Second International prevalent during his lifetime. He was among the first to combine the politics of anti-imperialist nationalism with international Marxism in the colonial arena. His fundamental teaching is that the struggle for national liberation is not opposed to the struggle for socialism, but an integral and necessary part of it. The Irish state and the political establishment are using crises developed by the long-term planning of hawkish elements within the military-industrial nexus of the United States to advance their strategy of aligning this state with NATO and the military strategy of the EU. Clearly, what is needed is to end this obsequious and collaborationist approach of the Irish political establishment to both the EU and NATO. Shannon Airport should be closed to the US war machine. All coordination and involvement in EU military strategies, including the battle groups and PESCO, should be ended. Irish soldiers should be withdrawn from NATO headquarters in The Hague and from NATO military engagements around the world. And Irish military neutrality should be enshrined in the Constitution. We only want the earth. We are the many, they are the few. Comrade James Connolly devoted his life to bringing an end to imperialism and giving our class hope of a better world and a better future. He sacrificed his very existence on this earth to give our class hope of a better socialist future. It was a full life, James, and well lived, comrade.
I would like to thank both Gerard and Alex for speaking. This marks the end of this year's commemoration. I would also like to thank you all for attending and invite you to join us in the Cobblestone for a drink afterwards. The final events of the Connolly Festival will also be taking place there. Victoria McNulty will be performing a one-woman show about the struggles of working class women, and historian Liz Gillis will be giving a talk on Connolly and feminism. Could I now ask that those carrying the banner move to the front of the grave and for comrades to fall in an orderly fashion behind the banner as we return to the front gate. Thank you.